When I asked for $62,000 to help my son breathe, my parents told me they needed to protect their retirement. My father stood in my living room with his arms crossed, looking at the stack of medical reports and contractor estimates I had spread across the coffee table. Behind him, my mother perched on the edge of my couch, her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully neutral. I was trying to stay calm, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could hear Eli's breathing machine humming from the bedroom down the hall. That constant reminder that time was not on our side. $62,000, that was what the specialist and the contractor had quoted together. Eli's lung condition had gotten worse over the winter, and our little rental house was making it harder for him to breathe. The old ventilation system pulled in mold spores from the crawl space. The windows did not seal properly, letting in pollen and exhaust fumes from the highway 2 blocks away. The bathroom had no ventilation fan, so humidity built up and created more problems. Dr. Brennan had been very clear: if we did not make serious environmental changes, Eli's lungs would continue to deteriorate. He was 8 years old, and he was losing lung capacity every month. The $62,000 would cover a medical-grade air filtration system for the whole house, new sealed windows, mold remediation in the crawl space, a proper ventilation system, and accessibility modifications for the days when Eli was too weak to climb stairs. I had gotten 3 quotes. This was the lowest one, and it was from a contractor my principal had recommended, someone who did honest work. My name is Grace Holloway, and I am 35 years old. I teach 4th grade at Riverside Elementary in Portland, Oregon, and I have been raising Eli on my own since he was 2. His father, Marcus, walked out the week after the diagnosis. He said he could not handle a sick kid, could not handle the hospitals and the bills and the uncertainty. That was 6 years ago. I have not heard from him since, and I have not asked for anything. I work, I budget, I save what I can. But teacher salaries do not cover medical-grade home renovations. I had $16,000 in my savings account. I had applied for every grant and assistance program I could find. Most had waiting lists that stretched into next year or requirements that disqualified us. Because I made just slightly too much as a teacher, I was short $46,000, and I was out of options. So I had called my parents and asked them to come over. I had prepared everything, printed out the medical reports, the cost breakdowns, the payment plan I had worked out with the contractor. I told myself that if I presented it professionally, if I showed them I had done my homework, they would see this was not a whim. This was life or death. My father picked up one of the estimates and scanned it without much interest. Edward Holloway, my father, had been an accountant for 37 years before he retired. He understood numbers. He understood risk. What he did not seem to understand was urgency. "Grace, this is a lot of money," Edward said. "I know it is," I said softly. "That is why I am asking for help. I have exhausted every other option." My mother, Marilyn, leaned forward slightly, her voice soft. "Honey, we understand Eli's condition is serious. We do. But this kind of expense, it is just not something we can take on right now," my mother said. I looked at her, trying to read her face. She looked uncomfortable, but not devastated, not the way a grandmother should look when told her grandson's lungs were failing. "I am not asking for a gift. I will pay you back. I can set up a payment plan, whatever works for you. I will take on extra tutoring, summer school classes, whatever I need to do," I said firmly. My father set the paper down and shook his head. "You are already stretched too thin. How would you realistically pay us back? You are barely keeping up as it is," my father replied. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I pushed it down. "I just need time," I said quietly. "If Eli's environment improves, he will have fewer hospital visits, fewer missed workdays for me. It will actually save money in the long run." "Grace," my father said, and his tone had shifted into that firm, finalizing voice he used when he had made a decision. "Your mother and I have worked hard our whole lives. We saved carefully so we could have a comfortable retirement. We cannot drain those accounts for something like this." Something like this, as if my son's ability to breathe was optional. "There are medical financing options," my mom added, her voice a little too bright, like she was offering a helpful suggestion instead of a rejection. "You could look into loans, payment plans with a contractor. Hospitals work with people all the time." "I have looked into medical financing," I said. "The interest rates were brutal, and most companies would not approve me, because I already carry $18,000 in medical debt from Eli's previous hospital stays. I have checked, I have tried, I have spent weeks researching every possible avenue before I came to you. I have tried everything else, I said quietly. You are my last option. My mother's face softened for just a moment, and I thought maybe she was going to speak up, maybe she was going to tell my father they should reconsider. But then my father stood up, brushing off his slacks like he was shaking off the whole conversation. We cannot do it, Grace. I'm sorry, but we have to think about our own future too, he said. We are not getting any younger, and we need that security. They left 10 minutes later. I walked them to the door, and watched them get into their late model sedan and drive away. I stood there on the porch until their taillights disappeared around the corner, and then I went back inside and sat down at my kitchen table. The contractor estimates were still spread out in front of me. $62,000. I had 16. I needed 46 more, and the only people I thought I could count on had just told me their comfort mattered more than Eli's survival. I walked down the hall to Eli's room and stood in the doorway. He was asleep, his small chest rising and falling unevenly. The breathing machine hissed softly beside his bed, doing the work his lungs could not. He looked so small in that bed, so fragile. He had his father's dark hair and my stubborn chin, and he loved science and dinosaurs and asked questions about everything. He deserved better than this, better than a mother who could not afford to keep him safe, better than grandparents who said no. I did not know it yet, but 1 week later, I would find out exactly what my parents thought their retirement security looked like. They spent $150,000 on a motorhome, while my son struggled to breathe in a house that was killing him. The phone call came from my brother Jason on a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from parent-teacher conferences, and was heating up leftovers for dinner when my phone buzzed on the counter. I almost did not answer. I was exhausted, and I knew Jason only called when he wanted something or when he had news he thought I should care about. I picked up the phone. Grace, hey, Jason said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, that easy confidence he had always carried. You are not going to believe what Mom and Dad just did. I stirred the soup on the stove and waited. They bought an RV, Jason continued. Like, a serious RV, a luxury motorhome. Brooke and I went with them to pick it up today. It is incredible, Grace. It has a full kitchen, a king-size bed, a bathroom with an actual shower. They are planning to travel the country. Can you believe it? I stopped stirring. When did they buy it? I asked. They have been looking for a few weeks, I guess, Jason said. They found this one at a dealership in Salem, and put the deposit down last week. It was delivered today. We all went out to celebrate. You should see Dad. He is like a kid on Christmas morning. How much did it cost? I asked again. My voice sounded strange even to me, flat and distant. Jason laughed. I don't know exactly. I think somewhere around $150,000. But it is worth it. This thing is basically a house on wheels. They are talking about driving to Yellowstone first, then maybe down the coast to California. Mom has a whole itinerary planned. $150,000. I set the spoon down very carefully on the counter. You should come see it, Jason added. They are parked at the RV resort off Highway 26. Brooke took like 100 photos. It even has solar panels and a satellite dish. They can basically live off the grid if they want. I'm sure it is very nice, I said. You okay? You sound weird, Jason asked. I am fine. I have to go. Dinner is burning, I said. I hung up before he could say anything else. I stood in my kitchen, looking at the soup. I had been stirring, and felt something cold and hard settle in my stomach. $150,000. They had spent more than twice what I needed for Eli on a luxury vehicle for weekend trips and retirement adventures. They had put down a deposit the same week they told me they could not drain their retirement accounts. I walked to Eli's room. He was awake, lying in bed with his tablet, playing some educational game I had downloaded. He looked up when I came in and smiled, that bright smile that still showed up even on his hard days. Hey, Mom, can we have mac and cheese for dinner? Eli asked. Sure, buddy, I said softly. Let me get it started. He went back to his game, and I stood there watching him, listening to the breathing machine that ran constantly now, keeping his oxygen levels stable. This room needed better air. This house needed to be safe for him. And my parents had just spent $150,000 on a motorhome. I went back to the kitchen and pulled out my phone. I found my mother's Facebook page, something I rarely checked anymore. She had already posted photos. There were at least a dozen, all uploaded within the last hour. The RV was massive, sleek and white with silver trim, parked in a sunlit lot with mountains in the background. My father stood beside it with his arms spread wide, grinning. My mother was in the doorway, holding a champagne glass, her face glowing. Jason and Brooke were in several shots, posing in front of the vehicle, laughing and toasting with my parents. The captions were full of exclamation points, "New adventure begins," and "retirement goals," and "living our best life." One photo showed the interior: leather seating, polished wood cabinets, stainless steel appliances, a flat-screen television mounted on the wall. It looked like a luxury apartment. The comments below were full of congratulations and envy. Friends and distant relatives gushing about how beautiful it was, how my parents deserved this, how exciting their future travels would be. I scrolled through every single photo. I read every comment. I saw my mother's replies, thanking people for their kind words, talking about how they had worked hard for this and it was time to enjoy life. Not one mention of Eli. Not one acknowledgement that their grandson was struggling to survive in a house they could have helped fix. I set the phone down and made Eli his mac and cheese. I brought it to him on a tray and sat with him while he ate, helping him when his breathing got too labored to chew and swallow easily. I smiled when he told me about the dinosaur video he had watched at school. I listened when he asked if we could go to the Science Museum this weekend. I told him maybe, knowing I could not afford the gas or the admission. After he fell asleep, I went back to my phone and looked at the photos again. I saved them. I took screenshots of the captions and the comments. I did not know why yet. I just knew I needed to remember this. I needed proof that this had happened, that they had chosen this. I opened my banking app and looked at my savings account, $16,214. That was everything I had managed to save in 6 years of working overtime, skipping meals, buying nothing for myself. It was nowhere near enough. I thought about the RV sitting in that sunlit lot, fully paid for, ready to take my parents on adventures, while my son fought for every breath in a house that was poisoning him. And I understood something then, something cold and clear. They had made their choice. They had decided what mattered to them: comfort, luxury, their own happiness. Eli did not factor into that equation. I did not factor into it. We were obligations they had fulfilled by raising me and acknowledging his existence at holidays. But when it came to real sacrifice, real help, we were not worth it. I closed the banking app and opened a notepad on my phone. I started a new document and titled it Timeline. I wrote down the date I had asked them for help. I wrote down the amount I had requested. I wrote down their refusal. I wrote down the date of the RV purchase. I wrote down the price. I did not know what I would do with this information, but I knew I was going to need it. Because this was not over. While they were chasing sunsets across the country, I was chasing oxygen at 7:30 p.m. I took a second job 3 weeks after my parents bought the RV. A tutoring center downtown needed someone for evening hours, Monday through Thursday, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. The pay was $12 an hour, barely above minimum wage, but it was something. My neighbor Mrs. Hale, a retired nurse, agreed to stay with Eli those evenings for $20 a night. I was paying out almost as much as I earned, but the math still worked in my favor by $48 a week. Every bit counted now. My days blurred together. I woke at 5:30 a.m. to prepare breakfast and get Eli ready for the school nurse to monitor him during the day. I taught 4th graders from 8 a.m. until 3:30 p.m., then rushed home to check on Eli, prepare dinner, and leave for the tutoring center by 4:45 p.m. I got home around 9:30 p.m., checked Eli's oxygen levels, cleaned the breathing machine, prepped the next day's lessons, and collapsed into bed sometime after midnight. I did this 5 days a week, and on weekends I graded papers and took on private tutoring sessions when I could find them. The fundraiser I had launched online barely moved. I had set the goal at $46,000, the amount I still needed. After 3 weeks, I had raised $2,040. Most donations came from other teachers at my school, parents of my students, and a few distant relatives who contributed $20 or $50 at a time. It was generous, and I was grateful, but it was not enough. At this rate, I would reach my goal in 3 years. Eli did not have 3 years. I stopped checking my parents' social media after the first week, but I could not avoid it completely. My brother Jason tagged me in a photo one Saturday morning. It was a family brunch at some scenic overlook, my parents standing in front of the RV with Jason and Brooke, all of them holding mimosas and smiling into the camera. The caption read, "Freedom on Wheels with the best travel crew." I untagged myself and muted Jason's posts. I did not have the energy to be angry anymore. Anger required fuel, and I had nothing left to burn. Eli's breathing got worse in October. The fall air brought mold spores and temperature drops, and our house had no way to filter or regulate what came inside. He started needing his inhaler 4 times a day instead of twice. His lips took on a faint blue tinge that never fully went away, even with the oxygen machine running constantly. Dr. Brennan increased his steroid dosage and talked gently about palliative care options, a phrase that made my stomach turn. I applied for a home equity loan, but I did not own my house. I rented. I looked into personal loans, but my credit score had tanked after maxing out 2 credit cards on previous medical expenses. I called the contractor again and asked if he could do a partial renovation, maybe just the air filtration system and the windows. He said he could, but it would still cost $38,000, and doing it in pieces would actually cost more in the long run. I thanked him and hung up. On a Thursday night in late October, I came home from tutoring at 9:30 p.m. to find Mrs. Hale standing in the hallway outside Eli's room, her face tight with concern. "Grace, the machine made a strange noise about 20 minutes ago," Mrs. Hale said softly. I checked on him. "He is breathing, but it sounds labored. I did not want to call you at work, but I have been watching him closely." I dropped my bag and went straight to his room. Eli was asleep, but his breathing was shallow and uneven. The machine beside his bed hummed, but the rhythm sounded off, stuttering slightly every few seconds. I checked the display screen. The oxygen output had dropped to 72%. It was supposed to stay at 95. I unplugged the machine, waited 10 seconds, and plugged it back in. It whirred to life again, but the output still read 74%. I tried adjusting the settings. Nothing changed. It was 9:47 p.m. The medical supply company's customer service line had closed at 9 p.m. I called anyway and got a recording telling me to call back during business hours or go to the nearest emergency room if it was urgent. I stood there in Eli's room, listening to him struggle for air, watching the machine fail to do the one job it was designed for, and felt something crack inside me. Not dramatically, not with tears or screaming, just a quiet, cold snap, like ice breaking under weight. I called my parents. My mother answered on the 4th ring, her voice sleepy. "Grace? Is everything okay?" It is almost 10 p.m. Eli's breathing machine is failing. "I need to take him to the emergency room. I just wanted you to know," I said. There was a pause. I heard my father's voice in the background asking who it was. My mother sighed. "Oh no, that is terrible. Do you need us to do anything?" I did not answer right away. I looked at Eli, at his small chest working too hard, at the useless machine beside him. "No," I said quietly. "I just wanted you to know." "Okay, well, keep us updated. We will be thinking of you," my mother replied. She hung up. I stood there holding the phone for a long moment, then I woke Eli gently and told him we were going to the hospital. He did not argue. He knew the drill by now. Mrs. Hale stayed until I got him into the car. I drove to the nearest emergency room, carried Eli inside, and waited for 3 hours in a crowded waiting area while he leaned against me, his breathing raspy and thin. They finally took us back at 1:15 a.m., stabilized his oxygen with a hospital-grade system, and admitted him for observation. I sat beside his bed in the pediatric unit and watched him sleep with a nasal cannula feeding him oxygen. The nurse came in every hour to check his vitals. I did not sleep. I thought about my parents, asleep in their comfortable bed, probably in some RV park with a view of mountains or ocean, not worried, not losing sleep, not sitting in a hospital room at 3 a.m., wondering how much this visit would cost and whether their grandson would survive the winter. By the time the sun came up, I knew something I had been trying not to admit. Eli was running out of time, and I was out of miracles. When the breathing machine went silent, the house finally did too. They kept Eli in the hospital for 4 days. His oxygen levels stabilized with the hospital equipment, but Dr. Brennan was clear. The home environment was accelerating his decline. Without significant changes, he would end up back in the emergency room within weeks, and each visit would weaken him further. I called the school and took a leave of absence. My principal, Mrs. Alvarez, approved it immediately and told me not to worry about my job. She also quietly arranged for the staff to take up a collection. They raised $800 and gave it to me in an envelope with a card signed by everyone in the building. I cried in the school parking lot for the first time in months. The hospital bill arrived 2 weeks later, $14,063. My insurance covered $6,000. I owed $8,063, due within 90 days. I added it to the pile of medical debt that already lived in a folder in my kitchen drawer. I had stopped opening that folder. There was no point. The numbers only went up. Eli came home with a new portable oxygen concentrator, smaller and more reliable than the old one. It cost $3,000. Insurance covered half. I put the rest on a credit card I had sworn I would not use again. In early November, I saw a news article shared in my neighborhood Facebook group. The RV company that had sold my parents their luxury motorhome was facing a massive recall. Structural defects, faulty electrical systems, water damage issues, hundreds of units affected. The company was offering repairs, but owners were reporting that the fixes were inadequate and the vehicles were losing resale value. Some owners were pursuing lawsuits. I wondered if my parents' RV was one of the affected models. I wondered if they were upset, if they felt betrayed by the company, if they understood what it felt like to spend everything on something that did not work. They did not call me. They did not reach out to tell me about their RV troubles or to ask how Eli was doing after his hospital stay. I learned later, through Jason, that they had been dealing with the recall and were frustrated and stressed. He said it like I should feel sympathy for them. I did not. Eli had good days and bad days through November. On good days, he could sit up in bed and play games on his tablet. On bad days, he slept most of the time, too exhausted to do anything but breathe. I read to him on those days, his favorite books about space and dinosaurs, stories about worlds he would never get to explore. Dr. Brennan stopped talking about treatment options and started talking about comfort care. Hospice, he said gently. Quality of life. Keep him comfortable, Grace. That is the priority now. I nodded and signed the papers because I did not have another choice. The experimental treatments I had researched a year ago were no longer viable. His lungs were too damaged. We were past the point of saving. Now we were just managing the end. Eli died on a Sunday morning in early December. He had been sleeping more and more, his body shutting down gradually, gently. I had moved a cot into his room so I could be near him at night. I woke at 6:15 a.m. to silence. Not the hum of the oxygen machine, not the sound of his breathing, just silence. I sat up and looked to him. His face was peaceful, relaxed in a way it had not been in months. His chest was still. I reached over and touched his hand. It was still warm, but there was no pulse. I sat there holding his hand for a long time. I did not call anyone right away. I just sat with him in the quiet morning light, memorizing his face, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the small scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike 3 years ago. When I finally called the hospice nurse, she answered softly. I will be there in about 30 minutes, Grace, the nurse said. Do not worry about anything. I will take care of it. She arrived within the half hour. She was kind and efficient. She confirmed what I already knew, made the necessary calls, handled the logistics I could not think through. I signed papers. I answered questions. I moved through the process like a ghost. My parents came that afternoon. They stood awkwardly in my living room, both of them crying. My mother hugged me while I stood stiff and unresponsive. My father kept saying how sorry he was, how tragic this was, how unfair. I am so sorry, Grace. We never imagined this would happen, my father said. I cannot believe he is gone, my mother whispered. I did not say anything. I let them cry and hug me and say their empty words, and then I asked them to leave. You should rest, honey. We will stay if you need us, my mother said quietly. No, please go, I said. My mother looked hurt, but they went. The funeral was small. I planned it alone, paid for it with money borrowed from Mrs. Alvarez. My parents came, dressed in black, looking appropriately somber. Jason and Brooke came. A few teachers, some neighbors, the hospice nurse. We buried Eli on a cold Thursday morning in a cemetery on the east side of town, and I stood at the graveside feeling nothing but a hollow, aching emptiness. That night, I went home to a house that was too quiet. I walked through the rooms that still smelled like antiseptic and oxygen, and I sat down at my kitchen table. I pulled out my phone and opened the document I had titled Timeline. I added new entries, the date of Eli's hospital admission, the date of his death, the total medical debt I now carried. I went to my parents' social media pages and took screenshots of their RV photos, their travel updates, their posts about freedom and retirement dreams. I saved everything to a folder on my laptop. I backed it up to a cloud drive. I did not know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I was building something, a record, a case, evidence of choices made and priorities revealed. My parents had chosen comfort over their grandson's life. They had chosen luxury over love. And I was going to make sure that choice was remembered, not out of hatred, not even out of anger anymore, out of something colder and more patient, justice. They once refused to help me for money, now they were begging me for it. It was almost a year to the day when my father called. I was grading papers at my kitchen table, on a Saturday afternoon in early December when my phone rang. I had not spoken to either of my parents since the funeral. They had tried reaching out a few times in the months after Eli died. Brief text messages asking how I was doing, generic condolences that felt copied from sympathy cards. I never responded. Eventually, The messages stopped. I almost let the call go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Grace," my father said, his voice sounding older and thinner. "We need to talk to you about something important. Can we come over?" "When?" I asked. "Today, if possible." "It is urgent," he said. I looked around my apartment. I had moved 3 months after Eli died, leaving the rental house that had slowly killed him. This place was smaller, cleaner, with better ventilation, and no memories attached to every room. I had rebuilt my life carefully and quietly. I had gone back to teaching. I had paid down some of the medical debt. I had survived. "You can come at 3 p.m., I said. "Thank you, Grace. We really appreciate this," my father replied. They arrived exactly on time. I opened the door to find both of them looking diminished somehow. My father had lost weight. My mother's hair had gone almost entirely gray. They stood on my doorstep like uncertain strangers, and I realized I felt nothing looking at them. Not anger, not grief, just a cold, clear distance. "Come in," I said. They sat on my couch, the same second-hand couch I had brought from the old house. I made coffee, more out of routine than hospitality, and set 2 cups on the table in front of them. I sat in the chair across from them and waited. My father cleared his throat. "Grace, we are in a difficult situation. I do not know if you heard, but the RV company had major problems," he said. "The recall turned into a lawsuit. The value of the RV dropped significantly, and we still owed money on it. We tried to sell it, but we would have taken a huge loss." I sipped my coffee and said nothing. "We made some financial decisions that did not work out," my mother said, her hands wrapped around her cup. "We borrowed against the house to cover some of the losses, thinking we could recover, but your father has not been able to find steady work, and the loan payments are more than we can manage." My father leaned forward. "We are facing foreclosure," he said quietly. "We owe $90,000 to keep the house. We have tried everything, refinancing, negotiating with the bank, but nothing has worked. We are out of options." The silence stretched between us. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the distant sound of traffic outside. "We know things have been strained between us," my father continued. "We know you have been through something unimaginable. But we are family, and we need help. We need $90,000. I set my cup down carefully. "How much did I ask you for?" I asked. My mother blinked. "What?" She said softly. "How much did I ask you for when Eli was dying?" I asked again. "Grace, that is not relevant right now," my father said quickly. "It is completely relevant. How much?" I insisted. "62,000, my mother whispered. "And how much did you spend on the RV?" I asked. Neither of them answered. $150,000, I said. "Nearly 3 times what I needed to save my son. You told me you could not drain your retirement accounts. You told me to be realistic. Do you remember that conversation?" "We made a mistake," my father said, his voice breaking slightly. "We know that now. We have regretted it every day since Eli died." "Have you?" I asked quietly. I stood up and walked to my bookshelf. I pulled down a folder, the one I had been building for a year, and brought it back to the coffee table. I opened it in front of them. "This is a timeline," I said. "Every conversation we had about Eli, every time I asked for help, every expense you mentioned for the RV, every Facebook post about your retirement dreams, every hospital bill I paid alone, everything." I pulled out specific pages and laid them in front of them. Screenshots of their social media posts, copies of medical bills, the fundraiser page that never reached its goal, photos of Eli in his hospital bed. My mother started crying quietly. My father stared at the documents like they were evidence at a trial. "I will give you the $90,000, I said. Hope flared in my father's eyes. "But I have conditions," I continued. "First, you will admit, out loud, right now, that you chose the RV over Eli's life. That you had the money and you chose not to help." "Grace, please," my mother said through tears. "Say it," I said firmly. My father's jaw tightened. His face flushed red. But he needed that money. I could see it in the desperate calculation behind his eyes. "We chose to buy the RV instead of helping Eli," my father said flatly. "And he died because you did not help," I said. The silence was suffocating. "Yes," my father said slowly. "He died because we did not help." My mother was crying harder now, her face in her hands. "Second condition," I said. "You will sign a statement acknowledging what you just said. I will write it out. You will both sign it, and then you will take the check and never contact me again." "You cannot mean that," my mother said, looking up at me with red eyes. "I do," I said coldly. "You will have your money. You will keep your house. But I will never see you again. That is the deal." I went to my desk and wrote out the statement in clear, simple language. I printed 2 copies. I brought them back to the coffee table, along with a pen and a check I had already prepared, filled out for $90,000, dated today. They read the statement. My mother cried. My father sat rigid, his hands shaking slightly. They both signed. I handed my father the check. He folded it carefully and put it in his wallet. My mother stood up first, moving toward me as if to hug me. I stepped back. The door is that way, I said. They left without another word. I watched through the window as they got into their aging sedan and drove away. I stood there until the taillights disappeared, and then I sat down at my kitchen table. I had just given away nearly everything I had rebuilt. My savings account was almost empty again, but I did not feel regret. I felt something else. Something cold and clear and final. I felt ready. Revenge fades, but justice leaves a mark. I waited 3 days before I sent the email. I wanted to be certain. I wanted to give myself time to reconsider, to question whether what I was about to do was right. But every time I thought about stopping, I remembered Eli's face in that hospital bed. I remembered the sound of the breathing machine failing at 7:30 p.m. while my parents chased sunsets in their luxury RV. I remembered the word realistic. On the 3rd day, I opened my laptop and composed a message. I attached the complete timeline file, 37 pages of documentation. I attached scanned copies of the signed statement. I wrote a brief introduction explaining who I was and what had happened. I kept it factual, not emotional. I let the documents speak for themselves. Then I addressed the email. My Aunt Teresa, my Uncle Mark, my mother's sister Karen, every extended family member whose email address I could find, the pastor at my parents' church, the president of their country club, 3 local journalists whose work I had followed, people who covered human interest stories and community issues. I read the email one more time. I checked every attachment. Then I hit send. The responses started within hours. My Aunt Teresa called me, her voice shaking. Grace, is this real? She asked. It is, I said calmly. I had no idea, Teresa said. I always wondered why you became so distant. Now I understand. I am so sorry. I wish I had known. I would have helped if I had understood the full situation. Thank you, I said, but it is too late for that. Other family members reached out over the next few days. Some were supportive, some were angry, accusing me of airing family business publicly, of being vindictive and cruel. I did not respond to any of them. I had said what I needed to say. The rest was not my responsibility. The story spread quietly at first, then more widely. One of the journalists I had contacted wrote a piece for a regional online magazine about medical debt and family obligation. She did not use our real names, but she told the story accurately, focusing on the broader issues of healthcare costs and moral choices. The article was shared thousands of times. People commented with their own stories of being abandoned by family during medical crises. My parents' church community learned the truth. I heard through Teresa that they stopped attending services after the 3rd week, unable to face the whispers and the knowing looks. Their country club membership lapsed. Friends stopped calling. The social life they had carefully built over decades crumbled in a matter of weeks. They sold the RV at a significant loss. They used the money I had given them to keep the house, but they put it on the market 6 months later. Teresa told me they moved to Arizona, somewhere smaller and cheaper, where no one knew their story. My brother Jason called me once, angry and offensive. Grace, you destroyed their lives out of spite, Jason shouted. I told the truth. I said quietly. They are our parents, he said. They made a mistake, but you did not have to ruin them. Would you have let your child die to buy a motorhome? I asked. He hung up. We have not spoken since. People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty, if I regret exposing what my parents did, if I think I went too far. The answer is no. Not once. Not for a single moment. Because what I did was not revenge. Revenge is reactionary and emotional. Revenge keeps the wound open and bleeding. Revenge demands suffering for its own sake. What I did was justice. Justice is measured and deliberate. Justice closes wounds by exposing truth. Justice demands accountability, not suffering. I did not fabricate anything. I did not exaggerate or manipulate. I simply revealed what actually happened. I let people see the choices my parents made and draw their own conclusions. That is not cruelty. That is honesty. They chose comfort over their grandson's life. They chose luxury over love. And when they faced consequences for those choices, they called it unfair. But consequences are not punishment. They are simply the natural result of our actions. My parents learned that. Eventually. As for me, I continued teaching. I paid off the medical debt slowly, month by month. I dated someone briefly, a kind man who worked at the library, but it did not last. I was not ready, and maybe I never would be. That was okay. I kept Eli's room intact for a long time, his books on the shelf, his dinosaur posters on the walls. But eventually, I packed it all carefully into boxes and donated most of it to the pediatric wing at the hospital where he had spent so much time. I kept a few things: his favorite book, a drawing he made of the two of us, his small collection of rocks from the park. On the anniversary of his death, I went to his grave. I brought flowers, daisies, his favorite. I sat on the grass and talked to him. "I miss you, Eli," I whispered. "I did what I had to do. I made sure the truth was known. I'm sorry I could not save you," I said softly. "I tried everything, and it was not enough. You deserved better than what this world gave you." I told him that his life mattered, that he was not forgotten, that the people who failed him did not get to walk away without consequence. The sun came out from behind the clouds as I sat there, warming my face. I closed my eyes and felt something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. Not happiness, not closure in the way people imagine it, but peace. The knowledge that I had done what needed to be done. That truth had been served. That Eli's short life had meant something, had changed something, had left a mark on the world that could not be erased. Revenge fades. It consumes and diminishes until there is nothing left but bitterness. But justice, real justice, endures. It leaves a mark that time cannot erase. It changes the people who witness it. It reminds the world that actions have weight, that choices matter, that love and indifference are not equal options. I stood up from the grass, touched Eli's headstone one more time, and walked back to my car. The sun was still shining, the air was cool and clean, and I was free.